When those who should say something don't, then those who should not say keep talking. That being said, let's talk about Kung Fu Panda. If you've seen the movie, you're familiar with Oogway, the ancient tortoise, the Grand Master, the one who chose Po as the dragon warrior, the wise one who speaks in proverbs and seems to understand a lot. But there's something about Oogway that many people don't want to address. Let me briefly walk you through the story. Tai Lung was the student of Shifu, who trained him obsessively, relentlessly. He saw this snow leopard cub and poured everything he could into making him the dragon warrior. Every technique, every form, every bit of strength. And Master Oogway, he watched. He watched as Shifu's training became obsessive. He watched as Tai Lung grew stronger, but also darker. He saw the pride building, the entitlement growing alongside the skill. Oogway had seen this before, at least with Kai. He knew what unchecked ambition looks like. He knew where this might go, and yet he said nothing. Not to stop the physical training, not to guide Shifu towards a different approach, not to teach Tai Lung what he actually needed to learn, when not to act, when to let go, when the strength without wisdom becomes destruction. He waited until the very moment when Tai Lung stood before the dragon scroll, expecting to be chosen, and only then did Oogway say to Shifu, "No, he is not the dragon warrior." It was too late. The damage was done. And on top of that, Shifu went quiet, the one person Tai Lung wanted to make proud. His reaction wasn't just anger, it was grief mixed with rage. The rage of someone who had been led to believe one thing his entire life, only to be told at the final moment that it was never going to happen. And what did Oogway do to improve this situation for the next time? When the consequences of all that silent watching came crashing down, Oogway left the situation for others to figure out by their mistakes. Now, here's my question. Was this wisdom or was this misunderstanding of responsibility? Because living under the same roof with someone, knowing they are being prepared for something they are not ready to handle, seeing the darkness grow alongside the strength, and choosing to say nothing until it's too late, that's not wisdom, that's complicity. The story dismissed this by saying there was darkness in Tai Lung, but Oogway not only had time and knowledge, but also authority, and yet he chose silence. And I think about this because silence isn't always neutral. Silence has consequences. This video isn't just about gatekeeping. This is also about the ones who see the gatekeepers and stay silent. The wise mentors who don't intervene. The established artists who watch new talent get dismissed and do nothing. And the wise ones? They're not always as wise as we assume. But here's what's interesting. After everything, after Tai Lung's fall, after the destruction, after the imprisonment, Shifu had to teach again, and he was emotionally closed. But the next time, when he taught Po, Shifu eventually learned, and he did it differently. He removed the expectations. He didn't try to force Po into the shape of what he thought the Dragon Warrior should be. Instead, he worked with who Po actually was. This time, he listened to Oogway and let Po be who he was meant to be. Even later on, he planted the seeds of knowledge he didn't even fully understand yet. Concepts like inner peace and chi. He became the student again, while being a teacher. This is growth. This is what makes a good teacher. So let me ask you, which teacher seems better? The one who guides you first and then observes your actions? Or the one who jumps to conclusion based on your tools, your equipments, your process, and then stops guiding you? I'm asking because I've met both kinds of teachers, and the wrong ones can do more damage than we can possibly imagine. I remember the day I bought my first camera. It was years ago. I had finally saved enough money, and this wasn't just any purchase. This was significant for me, because my whole life I had tried different hobbies, as kid, as a teenager, as an adult, and they never stuck. There was always something that made me stop. Self-doubt, outside judgment, lack of direction. But photography felt different. This time I was excited. I was learning about compositions, about lighting, and about how to see the world through a lens. I finally had a hobby I could call mine. Few weeks from that day, I met someone, roughly my age, maybe a bit older. We got into a conversation about photography. He has been doing it for years apparently. So I just asked him, any tips? And he said, yeah, switch to film photography. I laughed. I said, dude, I understand. I get that film has this beautiful feel in the process and the photos, but I just bought this camera. So maybe later. And he said, yeah, no stress. You should learn from this, but I'm telling you, film is the real thing. That phrase stayed with me. It echoed harshly because it meant that what I was doing, what I had just committed to, what I was excited about, wasn't real. It was practice, a stepping stone, training wheels before the actual ride. And suddenly, I wasn't a photographer anymore. I was someone waiting to become one. That moment took me back to all the times in my life when someone questioned my hobbies, questioned the use of my free time, and whether I was allowed to do this freely, as if they had some authority, as if there was a gate and I needed their permission to pass through. Now, you might say I should have responded differently, that he had a point. Maybe film photography is better. I mean, we all have our biases, right? And maybe from a pure technical standpoint, film has something that digital can never provide. But here's what that moment did, it filled me with doubt. And I think that's what gatekeeping does to many people. It doesn't inspire, it doesn't elevate, it plants doubt. Recently, I saw another example of this. It was a video on Instagram, staged obviously, but that doesn't make it less revealing. An older photographer was talking to a younger guy who was using a digital camera, and the old man said, listen, boy, you can do that, it's all good, but when you want to do the real thing, the artistic stuff, the fine art photography, that comes from film, and I can teach you. But what kind of teaching starts with such judgment? What kind of lesson begins with, only if you do this my way, then you are a real artist? He offered to teach, that's a generous gesture, I give him that. But he judged without even seeing the work. That's not teaching. That's validation of his own superiority complex, disguised as mentorship. A good teacher would have started with, show me your work. What are you trying to express? Here's how film might expand your vision. Not digital isn't real photography. Because when you judge someone based on their equipment before you've seen what they create with it, you're not evaluating their art, you're projecting your own insecurity. Let me break down the arguments I keep hearing. First, film photography demands discipline because every frame costs money. So you think before you shoot, you check the composition, you wait for the right moment, you pause and consider. This gives weight to the process. Okay, but if discipline comes from working within these constraints, then you can create those constraints with digital too. Limit yourself to 20 shots on a walk. Shoot fully manual. Turn off the preview screen. These are choices. The discipline isn't in the medium. It's within the photographer who can give weight to the process. And secondly, film photography is slow by design. You wait days, maybe weeks to see your photos. There's delayed gratification. You're not relying on instant validation. And this, they say, makes you more present, more mindful, more connected to the process. But here's the thing, mindfulness isn't a feature of the film, it's a choice. You can be just as present with a digital camera if you choose to be. You can observe, you can wait for the right moment, you can resist the urge to check the screen every 5 seconds. Or you can shoot film and still be distracted, impatient, and disconnected. The medium doesn't determine your presence, you do. And thirdly, the best of the best photographers from the previous century used film cameras. Yes, because that's all they had. Who told you that even if they had options, they would have surely rejected the other technology? I once saw an interview with an experienced photographer. He was asked, what's something you would like to change about photography today? And he said, I see many people obsessed with gear, always talking about their cameras, their lenses, and equipments, instead of just going out and taking photos. Fair point. And then the interviewer asked, do you have any advice for them? And he said, yes, more people should use film cameras. The height of irony. He was complaining about equipment obsession, And then he recommended a different piece of equipment, as if that was all the solution, as if the problem was the type of camera, not the superficial obsession itself. Let me give you a bad example. Imagine you're learning to draw, and you create a sketch with a pen. You're proud of it for the effort it took and what it means to you. And someone looks at it and says, "That's nice, but if you really want to be an artist, you need to use a pen made from the feather of a phoenix, harvested during its third life, dipped in the ink made from the young flowers, handpicked from the Amazon forest." You'd think they were joking, right? But it is coming from the similar place when someone says, "Your photograph doesn't have artistic value, which only a film can provide." If your photography is defined by this, then how much value did it have to begin with? I once heard someone saying this about sketching: the best pen you have is the one is on your table. And that, I think, is the point. The best camera for you is the one you have and actually use. This isn't about film versus digital. Film is beautiful, I'm not dismissing it. If you love that, you should keep using it. If it really connects you to the process in a way that digital doesn't, that is a valid perspective. But here's what bothers me. When you tell someone that their tool disqualified them from being a real artist, you're not protecting standards, you're protecting gatekeeping, and it has dangerous consequences. It limits access, it silences new voice, it keeps art behind the walls of expense and tradition. Think about how many people can now tell visual stories because they have phone camera. Think about how young creative minds can explore photography without needing thousands of euros in equipment. This was not possible before. The access was limited to those who could afford the specific technologies. And yes, some of those photos are going to be mediocre. Many of those beginner digital photos are going to be rough. But some of them are going to be extraordinary. And we'll never see them if we tell those people at the beginning, what you're doing isn't real. Come back when you have the right equipment. The destruction of confidence in new artists, it isn't accidental. It is a feature of gatekeeping. And I think the people doing this, the one who insists that certain equipment is the only real way, are afraid. Not afraid of losing quality, but of losing relevance. Because if art is about vision, about intent, about what you can communicate, then their years of mastering one particular medium doesn't automatically make them superior. And that's uncomfortable. So they move the goalposts. They say it's about the process, and the process requires this specific tool. But that's not true. And it doesn't matter whether they know this or not. It's just easier than admitting that someone with a different set of tools might create something more meaningful than someone with a film setup worth thousands of euros. Now, here's why I'm saying this, why I'm calling out the silent witnesses along with the gatekeepers. Because the ones staying silent, who are actually doing harm through their contribution to this, think that their lack of action is for honoring traditions and standards. But they're wrong, because they don't actually know any better. And the wise ones, the established photographers, the respected elders, the ones everyone looks up to, they are not as wise as they appear. Because real wisdom doesn't watch harm and do nothing. Real wisdom intervenes. Real wisdom guides. If you see someone being dismissed based on their equipments and you say nothing, you're not being wise. You're not being neutral. You're walking along the mistakes of Oogway, watching darkness grow and doing nothing until it's too late. I'm talking about the established photographers who see this happening and say nothing. The experienced artists who watch young talent get dismissed based on their criteria and stay silent. The ones who think, well, I went through this too, they will figure it out. Or, it's not my place to get involved. And that they need thick skin if they're going to make it in this field. This is the Oogway problem. Watching harm happen, having the knowledge, the experience, and the authority to say something, and still choosing silence. Because silence isn't neutral. When you see a young artist lose confidence, second guess themselves because of superficial opinions, spiral into gear obsession instead of creative growth, and you stay silent, you are complicit. Because the real problem is the culture that allows it, the community that watches it happen and does nothing. especially when questioning it would be uncomfortable, when speaking up might stir the pot, when calling it out might make you seem like you're not respecting the seniors, and then using them as an excuse by saying, they are the ones with decades of experience. Who am I to question this? This is cowardice wearing a false robe. Here's what I believe: whether or not a photograph has artistic merit is guided by intention and vision. It's about what you're trying to say, what you're trying to show, the story you're trying to capture. The camera is just the tool. It's about what you do with it and why. And if you can't see that, if you need to rely on the grain structure and the manual development, the purity of analog process to determine the value, then maybe you don't understand art as well as you think you do. If you are a young artist, someone just starting out, hear this. Work with what you have, learn with what you have, create with what you have. And when you're ready, if you're curious, explore other mediums. They might teach you something new. And if you are an experienced artist, hear this. When you see gatekeeping intervene, take a look around, not just in the art world, but everywhere. What is the price being paid for the wrongdoings at the cost of innocence, just for the sake of pretending to be nice? How much of this could be stopped if we just step in where needed? Ask yourself, which teacher does the world needs? The one who sees harm and says nothing, or the one who speaks up when it's uncomfortable? Because the next generation is watching, and they're learning from what we do and what we don't do. So let's choose better. If this resonated with you, let's keep this conversation going and write down your thoughts in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to or would like to hear this. And until next time.